started out in the arena of education, working on design, management, and delivery of quality education. And then he set out on his own to set up like a private consultancy, working with private schools, trying to get up the quality of education in these schools. And in 2005, when he joined UNICEF and worked on international inspiration, that was the first time that he possibly came face to face with the fact that sport can make a really big difference in the lives of people. And since then, he has worked pretty much incessantly for the sport for development sector. He's led the design and development of the Australian Sport Outreach Program, which is a program which has encouraged many, many sport for development organizations in the country. And many of us started out as fledgling programs supported by ASOP under the mentorship of Vivek, and have grown now into rather self-respecting and rather dignified entities, even if I may say so myself. So Vivek, thank you so much for being with us, and welcome to the session, and I invite you to take over.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining this session. Do I need this? We are here to talk about youth development with an emphasis on how sport can produce leadership qualities in youth. Before we start out on a perhaps a slightly lighter note, it's a good thing to look at what is this business of leadership that we're talking about. I was just thinking earlier, if sport is such a magic panacea for leadership development, there seems to be a lopsided picture in our country. I don't think our Prime Minister has participated very actively in sport, nor do I think our esteemed prime ministerial candidates for the coming elections have an inclination towards sport. And my conjecture then, if what we are talking about is correct, is that perhaps we should get hold of Vijay Amritraj or Sachin Tendulkar and get them to stand for elections. And if what we are talking about makes sense, then presumably they would be better leaders. I'm speaking as one of the disillusioned populace of this country where we are sorely lacking leadership. We have a country which has 70% of its population classified as youth. We have very, very, very few gold medals in the Olympics. In a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that we have tremendous potential in this country, and this is evidenced by the fact that you have huge numbers of developed countries investing today in India. Everybody is looking at India as the next place to be, because we're one of the only countries that has the potential to grow. And what we are talking about when we talk about leadership is unlocking that potential in a country where people are generally fatalistic. We tend to have an attitude of whatever God says, whatever my teacher says, whatever my parents say, that's what I'll do. And there are very few who stand up and ask why. They start out by being labeled rebels, and very few of them are actually successful. So we need to explore how the average human being who's modest, shy, and doesn't step forward very often can be encouraged to do so. As people who've worked in the sport for development arena, we've come to a very, very clear conclusion that change takes place in a massive, massive way. Speaking as a person who's been in the education sector, both private schools and in the public sector, working with UNICEF and so on, it's pretty clear that we have a long, long way to go. But sport has been able to produce quicker, more tangible results than any of the education interventions I have ever worked with. And this is why I chucked education totally and moved into the world of sport for development, because this is where I believe change can happen for education, for health, for women's empowerment, and so on. So we're going to structure our session in a very simple fashion. We're going to talk about the need for leadership. We're going to talk about what is leadership. I think it's very important for us to deconstruct what we are talking about, because this term leadership is a very esoteric term. And as far as the sport for development community is concerned, we need to have a clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve. We will then touch upon why sport, and we have people who had tremendous experience in sport for development and in youth development. We would like to be able to give you as a takeaway at the end of this session the question of how you can use sport to instill leadership, to give you a perspective on the kinds of resources that are presently available, and to give you a perspective on where you can look at strategies that have worked or not worked as your learning tools. And then finally, we need to look at how to prove whether the outcomes we are targeting, leadership, are achieved. Because I can tell you after 7 years of working in the sector that I've seen tremendous change take place in the kids that I've worked with from the time I met them first and what they are now. But it's very, very difficult to quantify it in terms. If I had to show a film of stuff that was happening, people would understand what I'm talking about. But to be able to articulate it in black and white on a piece of paper so that it convinces policymakers, that's a whole different ballgame, and that is really something that we need to be working at collectively as a sector. So I'm going to start by introducing our panel. We have Rob Thomas, who's head of the Magic Bus Center for Learning and Development. Rob is an outdoors man. He's spent a lot of his life doing most interesting things while the rest of us were locked up in classrooms. And he's a guy that is to be envied for the kind of life he's led. But the fact is, he is a leader, and one of the things that we will be exploring with this panel is how sport affected our panelists. We then come to Ashraf Patel, who is the founder of Prava and of Commutiny, which is the youth collective. Essentially, they work intensively on youth development, and the outdoors is a very strong element in their training. She will talk to you more about what we're doing in time. We have Marc-André. Marc-André looks after the SCORT Foundation, something he founded at a time. He was telling me earlier that he had a period when that he spent in Kosovo, where life was hell for people who lived through that conflict. And he was working with Adolf Ogi at the time, who was the advisor for sport to the United Nations. And obviously at the time, he did a lot of thinking and came up with the idea of getting together professional footballers to make a difference. And again, Marc-André will tell you more about what SCORT does. And finally, we have Derek Charway, who's come all the way from Ghana. He belongs to an organization called BUILD, of which he is the national coordinator. And he's also the sport development officer at the University of Ghana, involved intensively in research. And perhaps you will be able to give us a perspective on how we can actually prove the outcomes we're talking about. So to start the session, Rob is going to conduct a little activity which will help us to put leadership in perspective. Rob, all yours.
Doesn't matter where you're sat, but you're all going to be in groups of 5 or 6 starting now. Which is your group? 6, 5, 6? Your group 5, 6, have a pack of cards. Your group 5. Don't worry, I'm not starting a gambling union here. We try not to encourage kids along that sort of line, apparently. How many left have we got? One group of 5 here. That's all right, 7 will do. I was never much good at math anyway. Group of 5, 6 here, 5, 6 here, 5, 6 here, and that's the ball. Right. Has every group got a pack of cards? Yes. Yep? Okay. You open your pack of cards. Group of 4. Open your pack of cards. They should be completely shuffled. I'm now going to give you 10 minutes to work out a system in order to get it perfectly shuffled into perfectly suited. Starting with the top card, Ace of Spades, then 1, 2 down to Jack, Queen, King, then diamonds, then clubs, and then hearts last of all. Okay? So you've got 10 minutes when I start the clock, and your group, you've got to try and get as fast as possible. Hold on, you're going to miss out some vital information here, which might change who actually does best. The 10 minutes is practice time. At the end of the 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you to shuffle your deck of cards completely again, and I'm going to give you one timed run. So, recap. 10 minutes practice to go from a completely shuffled deck of cards into completely sorted. Ace of Spades on top, 1, 2, 3, down to Jack, Queen, King, followed by diamonds, same order, clubs, same order, hearts, same order. When it comes to the timed run, the start position will be completely shuffled, face up on whichever surface you choose. You will be asked to do your timed run, and it finishes when you've got it in that order, neatly stacked with the Ace of Spades showing on top. Clear? Your 10 minutes starts now.
And then 2 or 3 people doing this, giving out the rest of it. So the idea is to start by.
One more task before we go on. First of all, shuffle your decks completely. Then I will be starting a timed run. I will go 3, 2, 1, go! You can then pick the deck off of the surface you've chosen, sort out, and as soon as it's sorted and the Ace of Spades is on the top, your group has to shout, "Deck it!" as loud as possible. So, one quick practice. 3, 2, 1. Deck it!
Deck what?
3, 2, 1. Deck it! Thank you. Now I know the groups are ready. Okay. Right. Please shuffle your decks. You look at aspirant leaders, it's either sports people, politicians, business people, or whoever, and we look and judge ourselves against them. But people lead all the time. An action will affect us. Somebody will say something or do something, it affects our change in thinking. Invariably, the actions that are going to make the greatest difference are when there is a state of confusion or emotional turmoil. So, what goes on in terms of getting a group to go from complete strangers to actually forming one group got 30 seconds? That's impressive. You'll notice I've not checked the cards, but I'll be doing that later. We take your names and addresses. Okay. But just think about the comments that were said, that actually you thought you were going down one process, but suddenly somebody said, oh no, do this, and you went in a different direction completely. They are micro details in some respects, but have massive impacts to what actually ends up. So just think about what actions and approaches different individuals around you took. A very simple example I find in terms of tuning into emotional state that we're in and changes required. How many of you have been in meetings where you're sitting there listening to what's going on, you're losing the will to live, lack of understanding's going on, and I hope you're not putting your hand up at this moment because of where you are. That would really concern me. But you notice that there'll be a sense of internal feeling of frustration, maybe anger or confusion, or just switch off. And then all of a sudden, somebody may put their hand up or just say, stop a moment, could you just go back and explain what was going on? Everybody else at group says, oh brilliant, I'm glad you said that, great, I was waiting for that to happen. Well, why wasn't it you? What was happening to that person that it got to their tolerance level and over that action was required? And when you take acts of leadership down to that level, it doesn't matter whether they're politicians, leaders of NGOs, children, we can all learn about acts of leadership in the micro moments because we're all capable of it. I'd just like to start that thought process in your head, rather than me going on about people I admire and what and why and how. For me, that was a fundamental shift in how I look at leadership, how I'm led, but also how I become aware of developing a leadership style. Okay? Thank you, Vivek.
Thanks, Rob.
How's your energy levels?
Magic Bus is famous for its energizers. And you start off feeling that you might be embarrassed, then you become like a kid and get excited, and then you wind up with euphoria. And that's really what sport is about. To get this session going, I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to tell us a little bit about their organization, but I would like you, as part of talking about your organization, to focus on yourselves in terms of why sport is something that you see as an element that contributes towards leadership skills in your own life. So perhaps we start with you, Ashraf.
I don't want to be the first one to start. Sorry, can somebody else start?
Okay, who volunteers? Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Can anyone hear me in the back? Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, not talking about my organization. Okay, about myself. I've been a professional sports person, handball player. It's not very popular in India, I guess. I went through all the levels, played in a very high level in Germany. But at a certain point, I was requested to go to Sarajevo, former Yugoslavia, just after the war with military service, and that brought me to a place that I've witnessed as a child, because the first TV set that I got was brought by my father to tell me, well, you like the Olympic Games? Here is it, 1984. You can have it. You can watch the Olympics as long as you want. So I watched the Olympics. I've seen Torvald Dean, Katarina Witt, and everything. I was really amazed, and then I came back to the place which I've seen as maybe the most beautiful place with the most beautiful sports action going on, in total disaster. That made me think, growing older, saying, okay, there's something with sports that has a very positive and a very negative side, especially when you see all the Olympic sites and how they have been misused in the Civil War. Then I started studying, and maybe the most influential person I've had was my professor at that time, being involved in the Olympics as an Olympic researcher, who took me to Salt Lake City just after 9/11, and then Athens and so on. And from that I went to become a sports advisor with the United Nations and with Mr. Ogi's office in Geneva, predecessor to Mr. Wilfried Lemke, who we've heard today. So to make it short, to feel the power of sports has been something that has taken me through my life. And this is exactly what has been leading to founding the foundation that I'm glad enough, happy enough to be chief executive for. Basically, we discussed that with our board of directors, that there must be a way of empowering all those young people who have chosen their life to become community leaders, no matter where they are, no matter how the situation is, but someone who has decided not to be only a sports person, what we've just heard in the leading panel, not very much supported in most cases. We heard it, I want to be a sports person, but what actually do you do for your life? And then someone who is deciding not only to be a sports person, but using sports to build community and to be a role model is something that we think must be supported, and these people need empowerment. And then we came to see who could empower young people, and this is the big names. This is the big brands, and being very close to the professional football, we said, okay, there must be better ways of European professional football clubs to get into the international community, to be involved in the international development, and to be very, very close to those who actually do day-to-day work with children in their communities. And that's exactly what we do. We have a partnership which is called the Football Club Social Alliance, and these clubs being involved in the alliance send their coaches, instructors, community workers to work not just once as an in-and-out initiative, but at least for a year through different modules with the same group of people. It gives us the opportunity to have to get feedback, to learn from all the young coaches, as we call them, to learn about the situation, see them develop. And as I said, these are already community leaders. We work in partnership with local NGOs, pretty much like other organizations do it, who have their basis in the more developed countries. So we see ourselves as a facilitator between the international professional football and international NGOs.
Just to follow up on that, you mentioned that you are working with people who are already community leaders. How did bringing professional footballers together with these community leaders contribute further to their leadership skills?
So first of all, it's empowerment. They learn to speak up, they learn to team up, they learn to trust each other, they learn that they have something to show, that they have abilities they can use on a day-to-day basis, but also in order to get attached to any supporters, donors in their community. So, but basically, and this is what evaluation has shown, which we have done in the past, is that these young leaders, through the 1 year experience with the international instructors from Europe, have a lot of more strength individually. We look at it individually. We don't see the mass thing. We really take the groups small, and we believe in the peer-to-peer education. So the individuals, they have had new strengths, and they really develop their self-esteem. That's basically it.
Two further questions. One, you talked about modules. This suggests that you have a curriculum of some sort.
Yep.
Interesting to know how you developed that. And two is, how do you measure whether you've been successful?
We have developed a curriculum together with the international club instructors, but also in consultancy with the NGOs that already are in place, do the work on a regular basis. So that has been a process which has taken us 3 years to have a curriculum in place which serves all the partners involved. And how we measure, we ask our local partners to monitor what their community leaders do. The community leaders come, approach us. We don't only do the 1-year initiative, we do follow-ups, and we have external evaluation in place. And the external evaluation is mainly on the psychosocial individual level of each individual taking part in our program.
Thank you. Does anybody here have any questions that you'd like to direct at this point? Yeah, please.
I was part of Magic Plus 3 years back, and I fortunately had an interaction with the KNBB trainers when they had come down. And I've been a professional, as in I've been playing football very active. So how did it help me was because they come with the right kind of trainings, it gives you results, it gives you a purpose, and it gives you that, I've implemented their methods, and what happens is, we get results, so then children want to play. When I was young, our coaches used to do the same thing, I think, which is not applicable at all now, because we waste so much of time. I'm talking of the old methods that most of the Indian coaches still use. So when these guys come down, the curriculum they bring, or the methods they bring is so specific to the sport that it gives results. And that exactly makes us work more. So I have just done KNBB module, and it does help me. It's improved my entire team's growth. I get more people to join me.
Okay.
So that's very, very important. So you guys are doing a good job connecting the locals with the good trainers, because in a country like India, I don't think there's a problem with sportsmen, just that we don't have good enough coaches who can identify talent and can nurture it. Because we follow module, I don't know, some NIS trainings 50 years back, and we still do.
KNVB is the Dutch Football Federation, for those who don't know. We do it for different modules because we don't just do the football techniques, the football development things that I think you are referring to. We have 3 different pillars, which one out of 3 is the football skills, the training skills. The other one is what makes a good coach off the pitch, which makes like 75% of our empowerment training. And the next thing is life and soft skills, where we invite other organizations to work with the group of our young coaches, even between modules. So it's a little more holistic, but that needs 1 year. But thank you for your comment.
Because this is specifically about leadership, there's a number of points during my life that I can identify that people have made an impact on me and changed the direction I've gone in. Probably the first of those was at school, where North London, UK, not the most mountainous region of Britain or the world, but I had a number of teachers there that were very interested in climbing, and they would actually take us away at weekends and stuff. Me and another guy were so keen on this and showing promise, they actually took us away on their own personal holidays. And when I was 17, the school I was at, you could apply for a bursary to travel abroad. Had the opportunity to go into the French Pyrenees, which is, relatively serious big mountains for a 17-year-old to go on their first away trip unsupervised. And we got the money for this bursary, and I found out when I got back the battle these teachers had with the headmasters, the board of governors, in getting permission for us to go. And the reason we were finally allowed to go is the teachers just said to the hires, these guys have got all the knowledge we've got. They've got to go on and do it themselves. So that was quite a big impact on me. There was guys behind the scenes pushing to allow me to go, but if anything had happened, those guys were taking a massive risk. this is 30 years ago, so it'll probably be even more so now. And it was an area of integrity and responsibility that they felt honour bound to foster our interest and enjoyment and to move forwards. The second one actually happened over a period of 20 years. I went on to become a teacher, mountaineering instructor, sailing instructor, canoeing instructor. And when I was in my early mid-20s, I was working with some pretty rough youngsters out of Liverpool. And one guy in particular was really interested in the climbing. I just, similar to my teachers, I took him out and went climbing, rock climbing, and noticed he was getting very good and just said, keep going, keep doing this. I left after 3 months, another job, and didn't think anything of it. 20 years later, a mutual friend of mine said to me, do you know the effect you had on Steve? And I said, sorry, Steve who? And he said, Steve and such from, oh right, okay, yeah, I remember, he was really keen. He said, a bit more than that. He's now an international mountain guide, taking people up Everest or Aconcagua in South America. And he cited me as being the biggest influence on him to actually go in that direction. I never knew the impact that I actually had on that person for 20 years. So there's another lesson of sometimes those stones that we throw, and I see Ashraf's actually got a book here called An Ocean in a Drop, which immediately, a lot of my approach to how we work with people is based on ripples. I might throw a stone in a pond, I might not actually see where the ripples end up. If we've got a lot of people throwing stones in different ponds or in the same pond, those waves can become destructive. However, they can also be surfed. So what teachers had an effect on me, and how I found out I had a major effect on this one guy, now doing some amazing things in the mountains, was very, very powerful to me. And I suppose the most recent one is the outdoor centre for Magic Bus, which I came to head 2.5 years ago. And activity led, using similar experiential exercises, climbing walls, your ropes courses, but also the natural hills, treks, and so on and so forth. If I can be brutally honest here, one of the things that hit me coming into the Indian culture was a silo mentality of working. Unless I actually authorised something, it was actually quite hard for people to feel comfortable to take responsibility and ownership, because they felt, well, if it goes wrong, they would get the blame and lose jobs. So there was a big cultural shift for me to move people from, I'm not going to blame you. It becomes an opportunity for us to actually learn, one, not to make the same mistake again, but there may be greater creativity generated about what you've learned. So it became a mutual pool of activities and approaches and that, and it fostered then individuals leading in their areas of expertise. So the state of the grounds, the maintenance team, they're doing some really nice artistic projects with certain parts of our grounds around campfires or different things. Beautiful. Partly because they felt before they had to ask before they got permission. They now come up with ideas and I say, oh, that's good, thank you. And on you go. So the journey for me has been a lot of to do with being in the environment I found myself. Mark talking about the likes of Kosovo and seeing that type of dramatic thing has a major impact on anybody's life. The impact of mountaineering and mountain rescue on some of the things I've seen have also had a major impact on me, but it also made a huge difference to me not accepting where I am now. I don't know what the future is, but I'm going to do my utmost not to waste any time in it. And I learn so much from the different people I meet in different situations, because that's my choice, my path, my assessment of risk in those situations. And I look at other people and what they achieved and I just go, blimey, I couldn't do that. It took me a long, long time to actually turn that lens round and realise other people were looking at me thinking, blimey, that's impressive, I didn't think I could do that. So again, all of us have these capabilities. It's fostering an environment to encourage everybody from as early age as possible to look at what their potential is and not say, no, you can't do that. Oh, no, you shouldn't do that. If they've got that belief is going to take them a bloody long way. So,
just to play devil's advocate, if I were to organize a workshop for youth and put down PowerPoints and so on and so forth that laid out leadership and leadership skills, and I said, here you are, Rob, why don't you do this? You can do it quicker, you can address a lot more people in one space. Would you still prefer to take them out mountaineering?
no, because I think an experience is an experience anywhere. What have you just done in the room when I first came in with a pack of cards? You could see the energy, you could see the conversations going on, you could see interaction going on. That can take place in any space with any people. What comes down to me is how people react to that situation and then look at themselves and look at how they interact with others. So I believe, I just found my route in the mountains. I've also seen rock climbing or whatever, people have been nervous and thought, oh yeah, and they've got over it and done brilliantly. But there is still a choice for some people to say, serious, I couldn't do that. It's up to them to choose their path in the end. I will encourage them to do things differently. Just to give you an example, perhaps, of if I was instructing somebody, you know, on a big rock face and we were sort of 1,500 foot, 2,000 foot up, I'm still going to be nervous, but I've just learned how to deal with that over the years. So when I see somebody on a 5 meter artificial climbing wall, really, really nervous and struggling, the trick is for me to put myself in their shoes to understand how they're feeling. So I automatically imagine I'm a few hundred meters down a big dark cave with lots of scary animals about me, because when it comes to caving, I am really out of my comfort zone. The emotions and feelings that come out of that bloody terrify me. But that's no different from just asking somebody to come up and stand and do a PowerPoint for the first time in a lot of cases. There's still emotions, there's still feelings, there's still behaviours and actions. You take those into any environment. That's the critical thing for me.
I'm not a classical sporting person. I don't play the traditional sports. What I really enjoy most and my most compelling experiences of life have been as a scout and a guide in school. I was a guide in school, and I just want to connect it. And every time people ask you, okay, what were your influences? And I think that was a very, very big influence in my life. And I remember at that time, you didn't take up scouts and guides to do something good. You just took up scouts. I mean, I did, and many of us friends did, took up guiding just to have some fun, to go out, camping, hang out, campfires. And the doing good part of it was like incidental. It was just happening. But we really went out there to have fun when we were young as adolescents. The second experience I want to connect to sports is when in college, I was in Delhi University, and I was both in college and in my management school, we were part of adventure societies, and we were doing lots of, climbing, mountaineering, rock climbing. And I remember again, and I still do, the climbing, like Rob says, is different things for different people. Getting to the peaks was just not my thing. Getting to the top of the mountain was just not my thing in rock climbing. In fact, every time, even today, we run lots of rock climbing workshops, and every time we facilitate those, I have a catch in my heart. Oh, how am I going to do this? And so I don't really enjoy the getting there, but I really enjoy the process. I really enjoyed hanging out with the communities in the as you travel on a trek, seeing the flowers, hanging around in the forest. So those are some of the most compelling memories, and I'm going to really cut a long story short, and that's as sporty as I can get. But where does sports come in, or where just a little bit about us. My background, I'm basically a human resource development person, so my background is training, partly psychology, partly management. And Prava is the organization that I represent, and it means flow. It means the flow of life, a flow of life of young people, their journey of life. It really started, so I'm just going to take a few minutes. It's rooted in the demolition of the Babri Masjid that happened in 1992, and following that, if many of you will remember, and I can see many people would have been, in that time, would have remembered the riots at that time. There were riots across the country. For those of you who are from, out of India, there was just a lot of communal riots between Hindus and Muslims, basically right-wing groups rioting and creating serious conflict at that time because the demolition of the, post-demolition of the mosque. Basically, Prava began, some of us were working in the corporate sector, and we just decided we want to do something. We're not going to sit around and watch this, and what could we do? And that's when we started doing as volunteers. So we used to work in our regular jobs, and on weekends we used to go to schools. We decided we're going to work with schools because it's not about this issue. It's not only about communalism, and if communalism is really about who we are as people and how we relate with the world. And then we came upon this workshop design called Positive Me Workshop. That's how really Prava began. Jumping ahead, these workshops were on self and social issues, very deeply on deep self-awareness, and to connect every young person to what's happening in the world out there by making them feel a part of it, by making them feel that they are as much part of the social issues. That's where Prava is rooted. How does sports come in the picture? Just want to bring it to this context. Over a period of time, 1 year down the line, we just realized it's not about this issue or the other. We were really becoming a leadership building organization. We were becoming an organization where young people, by virtue of talking about themselves, what they stood for, what they wanted to do in the world, and actually taking action in the classroom. As Rob said, the action can be inside the classroom, outside. They were doing projects and actions. We began to realize that we are becoming a leadership organization, and we felt the best place to create leadership is also to get, the world is outside the classroom. Education doesn't happen in the classroom. So we are also an education organization, and that's how we started doing these camps. These are called Udan Khatola camps, which means basically, these are basically camps for young people to go from urban areas to rural areas. We were, that time, I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago, we were working in Delhi. And the whole idea is, how are we going to break the divides between us as different communities? And we are going to break it by making young people from different communities interact with each other across their religious, caste, and gender boundaries. That was the original purpose. And this happened through camps. And the camps, now I'm just coming to what we do. We do a lot of workshops, camps, which involves going out to communities, participating in action. These communities, in these communities, they do a lot of adventure work, lot of rock climbing, lot of what you call action-based projects, including dance and theater and music. And the whole idea is to use the youth idiom to help them discover themselves and develop leadership. This is what we do. And your second, did I miss a question?
You haven't told us about Commutiny.
Okay. So, So Prava is an organization that's been around for roughly 20 years. That's what we started when we were young. Commutiny is an organization that we incubated 5 years ago. Commutiny is, as the word might ring to you, it represents the mutiny within, in young people, which we feel is very important. The mutiny actually in each one of us that we have when we work in communities. The whole idea of looking at leadership development and youth development as an end in itself, and how do we make that happen? That we engage young people to go out there and work in communities other than their own, and learn from that, learn about leadership and life. So become learners of life by experiencing the mutiny within, which we believe is really important and which actually builds a better society. So it's so what is Commutiny? It's an association of youth organizations. It's a collective. We have decided to collectivize the whole idea. Vivek and I were just talking about, there are so many beautiful organizations, so much happening in the youth development field, but why is it that we are not getting time to work together? And we felt that we need a collective that brings together innovative and creative youth development leadership programs. So it's a collective of organizations which works on youth leadership using different means, whether it's sports, music, theater, social media, the works.
The last part was, how do you measure your success?
Okay. So very quickly, I have a sort of a booklet which says an autobiography of a young change maker, assessing Prava's impact. We've maybe I can just mention. So we did the study with a very small sample size. The sample size is not very big. We've worked over 20 years, so there are thousands of young people we worked with, but we never had a good database. I think that's something really I would first say. To begin with, every youth program must have a powerful database. We just were lax at that, and therefore to get back to our alumni 10 years, 20 years later became really, really difficult. I guess now the groups and young people are much more savvy, so the new organizations that come up are very good with this. But how do we measure? So we have done this assessment, and I just want to share some of the indicators. I think that's what you're implying. What sort of indicators we use? Would that help? So this book actually is a nicely done book with some comics and some sort of info bites, and we measure indicators on impact on career choices. People who've been through our programs, so what is their impact on career choices? And it says 77% of our alumni reported that Prava and its partners influenced their career choice significantly. This is the whole thing of most young people not knowing what to do when they are taking their career choices. Many of us have been pushed into career choices. Vivek mentioned in his opening speech that we just follow what the parents do and only some rebel, and it's true. Many young people end up taking career choices without really having had the benefit of time and experience to take it consciously. So we feel these programs, so the evaluation indicators: impact on career choices, impact on performance in school. Impact of these programs. So we have that 85% of our alumni who worked on community projects reported that performance at college and career has improved. So I won't get into the stats. Basically, a lot of good statistics, but I'll give you the indicators. The other indicators is, which I guess because we are Prava, but it's not necessarily true for Sports for Development program, but I think it's a very good indicator for a leadership program, which is how many young people, percentage of young people joining civil society organizations. And percentage of young people who may not join. The objective is not to create social workers, but how much percentage dedicate their lives to a social issue, at least one, which we think is an important development indicator in general of any leadership program. The other one is impact on relationships, which is relationships particularly with their parents, which I think is a very, very big indicator, but also with their friends and other community. And finally, this was mentioned in the last presentation, one of the speakers had mentioned, 87% of our alumni felt, now this is not a very scientific indicator, this is their feeling. It's a retrospective indicator. With 10, 15 years later, we've asked them what was the most significant contribution. They felt that Prava and its partners helped them become self-directed learners, which was mentioned as a key objective. I think these are some of the big ones, and there are many more, but I won't go deeper. Sorry.
Before we move on to you, Derek, I have one critical question. You produce, I mean, this applies to everyone here, you produce people who are suddenly empowered, they have the cheek to ask questions, they refuse to do things that they were expected to do. They're suddenly misfits. Because they're going back to parents who are saying, right, go and do this, and you're saying, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do this instead. How do you deal with that?
Not done me any harm. Been doing that all my life.
No, but you must encounter that with the kids that you are working on.
Depends, and I think there's a...
Yeah.
I think it depends on the culture that's also is operating in the barriers and norms that are expected. So the one that I grew up in is a very different set of circumstances. When I worked in China, I'd only been in China about 4 or 5 weeks, and I asked one of the guys at the British consulate, what is the difference between a culture here and there? And he put it very simply. He said the week before his PA had come up to him and said, I need to take the morning off. Really? And she'd been diligent also, but seemed really ashamed at wanted to take the day off. So he asked, and she was really reluctant to say. And he said, look, I'm not going to do anything or say anything. It would just be nice to know, you can trust me. She's, okay. My son's been naughty at school. What, really? We'd met a son, really, really polite, kind young boy. And he said, really, what on earth has he been doing? He's been asking too many questions. And there's different groups or different areas where there's different norms to what's acceptable. And I suppose when I look around the different cultures and backgrounds in this room, what India has, or different parts of India has as well within itself, compared to outside of India and different nations we've got, there's a route for all these people to find what is there and possible. But certainly my personal view is that if we don't look at the children changing thing, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. And therefore our children are the critical ones that should be rebelling, but rebelling in a responsible way. There's positive rebellion, there's negative rebellion. Maybe that's what we should be looking at on that side.
Right, Derek, would you tell us about your organization and yourself?
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much. I think Rob started with an icebreaker, and then Mark set the pace. I thought I'll follow suit, but Ashraf went, and then I think I have to wrap up for you. But before that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. She told me she wants me to be a lawyer. She's never been to school before, and she dresses me up and takes me to school every day, and that's my mom. And she's my role model, and I'm proud of her wherever she is now. And then he said, you've never been in a bed with a mosquito before, to see how effective the mosquito can be, right? If you want to know whether you don't have to be too small to know that you are important. The mosquito is quite small and very, very stingy, very effective in bed, and that's Mandela, and in blessed memory, we're proud of him. I played football. I got very, very popular and played professional football to the first division, my senior high school. I got knocked and I couldn't continue again, so I just felt, you know what, just do something in sports to help others. I was practicing sports for development along the line, but I never knew. I was just doing it. Little did I know, I became a student leader in all the various levels of my education, especially sports prefect in high school. And then I got to the university. I became the general sports secretary for the University of Ghana as well. And then I heard of this program from UK Sport, launching a program in Ghana called the Breakaways International Leadership Development Program. And I joined it. And I climbed up to a local tutor in the program. I finished the university, started working with the sports directorate of the University of Ghana, and then I became the national coordinator of the program. That's the Breakaways International Leadership Development Program. And I think that's where sports for development started making sense to me, what it means. Yeah, before then, I had done psychology and sociology in the university. I was contemplating which one to continue, psychology, sociology, but I believe we are here for a reason. There is a problem, or probably there is no problem. We want to shape things, or we want to make things better in the society. And there are various interventions. Vivek, I hope I got your name correct, started by saying that when people stand up to get things right, others call them rebels. And I think whatever they say, whatever medium they use, whatever ways they use, they want to fix something in the society. And I believe we've come all the way from Europe, from Africa, all over here today, basically to talk about sports for development. I don't think we have to prove to the world that sports for development can make you less obese, can make you better, can get girls together, can get girls or women together to socialize because they were not having it, stuff like that. I believe there are issues in the society which sports for development is addressing. And so the need for us to relate most of what we do to the society. And I believe the government, whatever in whatever country, should know, should be spoken to about, or probably whatever sports for development venture that we evaluate should lead towards developing, fixing the society, getting people on the right track. But most often, everyone wants to prove, everyone wants to say, sports for development, it does this, sports for development makes the girl who was having less opportunity to socialize is socializing now. Sports for development is helping people to know someone, make contacts and stuff like that. We should relate it to the society. We should fix whatever is missing in the society through sports, because sports is passion, leadership is passion, leadership is drive. You need to have time, you need to look at it critically before you act. And that's a little bit about myself. So about the BUILD program, I became the national coordinator of the BUILD program in 2011. In the same year, I had a chance to also start lecturing in the university as a very, very young man coming up. It wasn't easy. It also comes with its own challenges. But I think, as I said, the way you carry yourself would help you to touch lives of people. And the BUILD program actually uses limited resources and builds relationship among the youth. It is a 4 years project, and it's funded by the TOPS Foundation in the UK, and is supported by UK Sport, also in the UK. But basically, it is managed by the by Ghana. Let me put it that way. So what we do is we have 4 staff, just 4, the director, the national coordinator, and then 2 coordinators in northern Ghana and southern Ghana. But the 4 staff have been able to touch the lives of hundreds of thousands of children. And this is how we do it. The BUILD program itself established a link with the Ghana Education Service and then the Ghana University Sports Association. So what we do is we need to develop a strategy to enter into the community. Anyone can enter into the community, but you need some goodwill. You need them. You need the attention of the community. So we have 7 public universities in Ghana, and they are strategically placed in 7 out of the 10 regions in Ghana. And so we first of all we trained the sports directorate or the sports sessions of the various universities in the 7 regions. And then from there, we support them. And they also go ahead to train selected schools, mostly less privileged schools in the regions. And that kind of training is a leadership training program. And we have a manual which is well designed to fit the people we are training. And then these senior high school students we train, let me take it this way. Those from the university, we train them, and then we call them local tutors. And then they go ahead and then train the senior high schools that have been selected. And we call the senior high school students young leaders. And the young leaders, at the end of the training, form clubs in the schools, and we call it BUILD clubs. Now, it is our job, it is my job, and the coordinator's job to work with these clubs in the schools. And they sort of organize programs within the community in which their school is located. And most of these programs are directed to children, and children of all abilities. So basically, that's how our program flows. And up to date, we've involved a lot of children. For me, I think it's more than 50,000 children. But we count those who come to our festival, those we involved in our festival. And we have about 10,000. Those we've involved in our sports festivals, about 10,000. But in terms of children within the community is a lot. We can count all of them. And then we've trained about 500 teachers and university staff as well within the sports directorate of the various universities. And for the young leaders, which are senior high school students that we've trained, they are about, I think, 2,000. To be corrected, we'd have to go through the data to give you correct figures. And then in terms of evaluation, it's a 4-year project. But within the BUILD program itself, we've done some researches. For instance, we did a project called a research called the sports equipment project, And basically, we know having sporting facilities is always a problem, is always limited. So what we did was to just see how people can use the limited resources that they have. And sometimes it comes with innovation, improvisation, and anything we find ourselves. So for instance, as we are here today, at the end of this program, because at the end of this program, whatever we use, when we go to the field, we can use them. We can fill in this with sand, and it becomes our cones. And the papers that are over here, and then the sellotapes that we use, we don't throw all the papers away. We crump them together and use the sellotapes, and they become our throwing balls. So we did a kind of research on this, and also we've also been part of an international research project, which is Sustainable Development of African Sports. Our organization was also sampled as part of some organizations in Africa in the research. So basically that. Now in terms of evaluation, in the next few months, the program or the project will come to an end. And we've already started making plans for evaluation. All the data that we've collected and organized will be used for the evaluation process. And we're doing the evaluation with a third party. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. We were going to open the floor for questions and so on, so I'm not going to do that for the moment. It's 5:45 and we're way over time as usual. What I will do is to try and quickly sum up what we're trying to achieve here. 25% of the global population is youth. A large population of that youth has what I like to call potential that needs to be unlocked. Potential that exists, but until there's a catalyst, will never be achieved. It's pretty clear from what's been discussed here, and as you will see through the next 3-4 days, sport is a very powerful means of getting children to discover things about themselves, children and youth, to discover things about themselves that they never knew. We've all seen a child participate in a game that they thought that they could never play well at, and once they've scored a goal, there's no stopping them. You think to yourself, you've unleashed a monster. So the way I see it, the business of sport is one very powerful avenue that can be used to help youngsters develop an innate self-confidence, and for them to then start using that self-confidence to change their lives in a tangible way. That confidence, and this is the other thing that sport lends to you, is that when you have to take a decision, for example, you're a football team and you've got a very strong defense, it's no use going and trying to bull your way through the defense because it won't work. They're usually bigger than you. That's when you need to start thinking. That's when you need to start working with your teammates on strategies. And there are several occasions, I mean, most of the sports films we see talk about how the minnows overcome the giants. Your David and Goliath scenario. Well, it means that somebody has decided that they need to think. Somebody has decided that they need to leverage all the resources available within a team of people. But most importantly, they decided to think. And they decided that it was not impossible to achieve things that previously seemed impossible. And this is why we, as people who talk about sport for development, stress so strongly on sport as a means to achieve these results quickly. Nevertheless, this is not a universal panacea. There are attendant risks, dangers. As we talked about earlier, we've had experiences here in India. NAS works with girls, largely of Muslim community. And over a period of time, when you work with girls for a year, their mindset changes. They start asking questions. So they've had situations where they go home and they start asking their parents, and the next day you find the girl coming back beaten, thrashed to bits by a father who wouldn't accept this child's rebellious behavior, and so on. So I would think that it is one thing for us to talk about releasing potential, but when you structure your program, you also need to look at the ground realities of what's going to happen when people's attitudes changed. The other thing that seems to be in common here is that everybody who is talking about using sport as a development tool doesn't just go out there and play sport. They have a structure. They have a curriculum. And usually this curriculum is what might be termed modular. So you can use 2 modules or 3 modules, or if you have an extended period, you can have several more modules. But you look at the modules that are relevant to your particular target audience at a particular time. So it's very critical to structure a program in a systematic way, looking at ground realities.